Testing, can you hear me? By my watch, it is just after 6:31 p.m. Welcome to the final meeting of our McLean County Property Tax Introduction Series. On behalf of myself, Treasurer Rebecca McNeil, and County Clerk Kathy Michael, I want to say thank you all first and foremost for being here tonight. It's been a busy several months for us. I know it's been a busy week for a lot of you folks with the election and everything. It's very, very much appreciated and frankly vital that you're here tonight. I always say participation is key to the government process. And involvement democracy starts at the ballot box, but it sure as heck doesn't end there. Coming to events like this and being a part of some of the other things that I'm going to talk about and Treasurer McNeil are going to talk about are absolutely vital in helping us do our jobs and serve you to the best way we possibly can. I'm going to make a few other introductions before we get going, and then we'll get into the heart of the program. First off, like I said, we have Treasurer Rebecca McNeil sitting over here to my right. Back here, we also are honored to have County Board Member Val Lehman. She's here. She represents a good part of City of Bloomington. And then we have representing the City of Bloomington Township Assessor's Office, we have Maureen Sterenberg. She is the residential chief deputy assessor. So she's going to help try to answer some of the more specific questions that you may have if you are in the City of Bloomington Township, understanding that we don't have access to the software system, so we can't really get a good look at your record to answer too specific a question. But she can give a little bit more additional insight if you have specific questions about your property in the City of Bloomington. We also have, what's your name, sir? Yeah. Bill Clark. We have Bill Clark from Downs Township. You are the supervisor? The clerk. The clerk for Downs Township, who might be able to answer some questions about Downs as well. So thank you all again. Oh, yes. I'm sorry. How could I forget? We have County Board Member Corey Byrne from District 10? From District 10, which is East City of Bloomington. So thank you all very much for coming. And I hope you find what we're about to talk about educational. This, I'm going to warn you right now. I say warn you. This isn't really a warning because this isn't going to be dangerous. It's going to be interesting. But this is a very 30,000-foot view of the way the property tax assessment process works. It is important, I feel, and I've been doing this for a long time, I think it is important to understand the nuts and bolts of how the system works. If you understand how the system works and why we do what we do, you're going to be in a better position to understand your assessment, to understand your property tax bill, and then if you do ultimately decide you want or need to file a complaint, you're going to have that much more backup when you go in. So I'm going to go into this 30,000-foot view. I'm going to talk about what we do, what the township offices do, and then I'm going to let Treasurer McNeil talk about what her office does. And we will stick around and answer as many questions as we have to in order to help you understand the process. We are here to provide information to you. That's number one part of our job. So, first slide. What is the property tax? The property tax is the primary means of funding local government. It is the primary means of funding local government in the state of Illinois. It is the primary means of funding local government in the United States of America. You go to all 50 states, and odds are they are going to be, to some extent or another, either mostly or entirely reliant on the property tax to fund local services. By local services, I mean the county government that you're here now, your city, your village, town of Normal, your school districts, the community college district, libraries, the water reclamation district. Every government unit that we have at the local level in the state of Illinois is funded through the property tax. The property tax is what's known as an ad valorem tax. Ad valorem is a fancy Latin word. All ad valorem means is according to value. The property tax is levied according to the value of your property. Now, that's different than the other taxes that we deal with in our day-to-day lives. When you think about your income tax, when you think about the sales tax, when you think about all those taxes, those are passive taxes. They're sort of collected through the stream of commerce, either as through payroll or as you purchase something, they'll tack a little bit of extra on for the sales tax. And basically the government collects what it collects. If you have a lot of sales or people are making a lot of income, the government collects a good amount of revenue. If those sales collections kind of drop, if income slows down, if you hit a recession, your income tax collections drop. It's very passive in that way. The property tax is much more direct. Come on in. You can feel free to sit up here if you'd like. The property tax is a much more direct tax. What that means is the government determines what it needs to collect, the dollar amount of revenue it needs to collect through the property tax, and then allocates that tax burden out according to the value of the property. You have a big property, you're going to have a relatively larger portion of that tax bill. By big, I mean a higher valued property. You're going to have a relatively larger portion of that tax bill. If you have a relatively lower valued property, you're going to have a relatively lower amount of that tax bill, but it's going to be proportionate between the taxpayers. That tax rate that we all pay, 5% on my house, 5% on your house, 5% on the Rivian plant. We all pay that same percentage according to the value. The way that process works is that spending is determined by each local unit of government, and then it's allocated proportionately. Some units are bigger than others, some take a larger slice, but that's essentially how it works. Next slide, please. The first concept to understand after we've established what the property tax is that the property tax is based on the fair cash value of your property. That's what we call it here in the state of Illinois. We use the term fair cash value. It is synonymous with the term market value. You have an appraisal done, they're going to be looking to determine the market value of your property. In Illinois, we call it the fair cash value. And what does that mean? That's the amount by which or for which a property can be sold in the due course of business and trade, just, on a day-to-day commerce level, not under duress. So both a willing buyer and a willing seller, with both sides equally motivated in terms of cash and other considerations and things like that. But that's the definition of fair cash value. What we're looking to find is on Thursday, November 7th, 2024, Bloomington, Illinois, I want to sell this property for $200,000 and Becky McNeil wants to buy it for $200,000. That is a fair cash value. That is what we're looking for. In 99 cases out of 100 in the state of Illinois, we are looking at the value in exchange. And what that means is it's that exact same basis that I just talked about. What I want to sell it for and what you're willing to pay for it. The major exception is farmland. Farmland is not valued according to value in exchange. Farmland is valued according to its economic productivity. And there's a whole state-determined formula that's all figured out. We don't get too many farmland complaints in the actual process. I'm not going to spend really any time talking about it, but just understand that it is valued under a little bit of a different system. And then there are a couple other niche classes of property that are valued under slightly different than market value circumstances. But 99% of the properties in the state of Illinois are based on their market value, what they could generate in that arm's length transaction. That's what we're looking to find at your local assessor's office and then up at our office. We're trying to determine what your fair cash value is because that value is what your taxes are going to be based on. This is another thing to understand. For some reason, that the General Assembly created years ago, we decided your taxes are not going to be based on 100% of your market value. Your taxes are going to be based on 33 1/3% of your market value. The reasons for that have to do with the way Cook County has their system set up, and it helps it make sure that everybody in the state can be equal. I'm not going to get into the details of that. Just so you know that in 101 counties in the state of Illinois, your taxes are based on 1/3 of your fair cash value. In the end, it doesn't make any difference. If you have a house worth $100,000, market value, its assessed value is $33,333. It has no bearing on the actual calculation of the value. But we have to talk about it because that's the way it's displayed, and you'll see it on your tax bill. The fair cash value is determined at the township assessor's level. The township assessor and their staff, City of Bloomington, Town of Normal, larger jurisdictions that have staff going out to do it. In more rural areas of the county, you may have one township assessor he's the assessor, he or she, and they're the ones who go out and they do the work and they submit the values. But for the most part, it is going to be determined at that level. Next slide, please. Township assessor is always going to be the first point of contact in the assessment process. The township is responsible for the 3 keys of value. They're responsible for discovery, listing, and then ultimately evaluation. Discovery is, hey, we have a property out here. There's a barn we didn't know about on it. That's the discovery process. They go out and they identify that property has an improvement on it. They're responsible for the listing. Well, they'll go out with their tape measure or their electronic measuring device, and they'll measure the dimensions of that barn, and they'll get the characteristics. They'll get how many square feet it has, and they'll get how tall it is, and they'll get what it's made out of. That's the listing process. And then they will ultimately look at those characteristics, look at market value, or look at market data, and they will determine ultimately the market value of the property. On or about June 15th of every year, they are to submit that data to our office at the county. We call this the roll, or we refer to it as rolling the data, but they will roll their data up to our office. And then that's when we begin, my office, the Chief County Assessing Officer, that's when I begin my work and my staff's work. Next slide, please. So again, we're getting into a little bit of detail in here, but I want you to understand this because this is only going to help you if you do ultimately decide that you want to contest your value, okay? We need to figure out what assessment is. I am an assessor. Ms. Sterenberg back there is an assessor. We are similar to appraisers. We are in the same profession. We have slightly different rules and regulations that we follow, but we're essentially doing the same thing. Real estate appraisers, so if you've recently purchased a house or you've gotten a loan, you've taken a mortgage out on your house or something like that, you might have had an appraisal done. And you might have had a real estate appraiser come out and do it. You did have a real estate appraiser come out to do it. They used fee appraisal principles. That means they're valuing individual properties on an individual basis as of a certain date, as of the date of the appraisal or the date of the valuation. So if you look in the lower left-hand corner of the screen there, you'll see an example. We've got a 1,550 square foot house. A fee appraiser is going to say something to the effect of, based on the characteristics of this property, this appraiser believes the market value of the subject as of July 22nd, 2022, that's the valuation date, is $157,500. A little bit simplistic, but that's pretty much the essence of what an appraisal is. We are assessors, and we assessors use mass appraisal principles. What are the differences between fee appraisal and mass appraisal? Well, fee appraisals, they value one property, one single property. We mass appraisers value a universe of properties. We value entire groups of properties. They, on the fee level, they value properties as of one given date, depending on the needs of the client and the needs of the appraisal. We assessors value property for one date. That date is January 1st of the assessment year. That assessment notice that you would have gotten, either the letter or the postcard, would have been for January 1st, 2024. We are trying to establish the value of your property as of January 1st, 2024. Next year, it will be for January 1st, 2025. That is the valuation date. That is the consistent date we are valuing the entire county on to make it as fair as we possibly can. So as an example of mass appraisal, you'll see over here on the right side of the screen, we have 3 houses. We've got a 1,600 square foot house, a 1,550 square foot house, and a 1,500 square foot house. As a mass appraiser, I might say, market data indicate that properties in this neighborhood have sold on average for $100 per square foot. And we'll take that $100 per square foot and we will multiply it by the size of the property, and that'll give us our assessed values for those properties. Again, let me stress, this is a very simplistic example of what we do. There's a lot more detail that goes into it, but essentially this is the essence of what we do. We are using mass appraisal principles to value groups of similar properties at the same time. Next slide, please. What this allows us to do is to maintain consistency. You want to understand that your property was valued on the same basis as your property and your property. I'm not switching up the ways you have, let's say you have 3 very similar properties. I'm not switching up the way I value your property versus your property versus your property. I'm using the same underlying characteristics. I might make some adjustments to account for some unique special features, but for the most part, we're maintaining that universal basis between your properties. That's what we as mass appraisers do. I am the supervisor of assessments. My responsibility is a little bit removed from what your township assessor does. I'm responsible for making sure that the property tax burden is collected fairly, is collected correctly, and is collected in accordance with market value, and that any and all state laws are being followed related to the valuation process. One of the biggest things we do is we handle all of the exemptions and deductions. We have, how many homeowners do we have here? Show of hands. You guys, most all of you own your home. You get a homeowner's exemption on your property. We administer that exemption. How many of you are senior citizens or getting the senior citizens exemption? How many of you are senior citizens not getting the senior citizens exemption? We need to talk. We should be able to get you, if you're over 65, you should at least qualify for the over 65 exemption. Then we have other exemptions. We have low income, so we'll talk about those at the end of the presentation. But that's what my office does. A lot of what we do is administering these things, making sure people are qualified, receive them, making sure people who no longer qualify, that those are removed. That's a lot of what our staff does downstairs. Another one of the big things we do, and I'll talk about here in a minute, is we review sales transactions and we qualify them for the equalization process that I'm going to talk about here. We develop equalization factors. Those are what you would have gotten on the postcard or in the letter that you got in the mail. My office determines that number. We send out those assessment notices. The assessor, the local assessor may determine the value, but that notice comes from my office. We serve as the support staff for the County Board of Review as well. If you do file a complaint, you'll come into my office if and when you have a hearing. I do not sit on the Board of Review, but my office and our staff does help them with their administrative tasks. They're an independent body. They can, they have their own discretion to do things, but my office is their support staff, and I'm the clerk of that board. And then I have some other stuff I have to do by statute. After that roll is submitted, after the township submits the roll, that's when my office jumps into work to do the equalization process. Next slide, please, Dan. The first step of the equalization process is this form right here. How many of you have ever seen this form? Wrong. You own a house, you have all seen this form. You just don't know that you've seen this form. When you closed on your house, remember you went to that closing at the lawyer's office or at the title company, and they gave you a stack of papers about yay high, and you had to sit there for 2 hours, and you had to sign your name on all these various pieces of paper and shuttle them off, and it took a long time. In that stack of papers was this form. It's the PTAX 203. This is the Illinois Real Estate Transfer Declaration. Every property that transfers in the state of Illinois is required to submit this form. This form is vital for what we do. This form is how we determine market value of the property. Like I said, every filing goes through this, or every property that transfers goes through this. And you disclose on this form, and actually in some places it's called a sales disclosure form. You are disclosing the circumstances of the sale. So remember a couple slides back we talked about arm's length transactions? This is how we know whether or not your sale was an arm's length transaction. This form asks questions like, was the property advertised for sale? If it wasn't advertised for sale, that's not an arm's length transaction. Did you sell property to your brother? If you sold property to your brother, that's not an arm's length transaction. Well, then what do you say? What if my brother's a jerk and I wanted to really stick him over on the deal? Well, that doesn't matter. That's still not an arm's length transaction. Anything like that, anything that differs from the traditional market is going to cause us to kick that sale out. But for the most part, unless there is a compelling reason to do so, we include every sale that comes through as part of our analysis. And I would say probably, if it is an actual sale where money is exchanged, I would say probably, what do you think, Connie? 85% of them fly through without a second guess. So yeah, those are vital. That's an absolutely vital part of the process. This form is also where you might have applied for the homestead exemption. You know, there's a box on there that says, will this be your primary residence? That's how one of the ways we know to apply the homestead exemption is by this form. Like I said, we review every filing. We get about 4,500 of these that pass through our office in a given year. Some counties smaller than us, they may only get a couple hundred of these in a year, maybe even fewer than that. A friend of mine up in Will County, Joliet, he gets, I want to say 15,000 transfer declarations in a year, and Cook County gets a countless number of transfer declarations. This document is the single most important document that we process in our office. This document is responsible for the assessments that you see in front of you. Next slide, please. So what is the equalization process? Your township assessor has determined, to the best of their ability, their estimate of value on the property. They think your property is worth, and they determine your property is worth this much money. So then what is this equalization that we're hearing about? What we do for equalization is we are making sure that every property is valued at the same percentage of its market value. And that sounds cumbersome, and I get that. So I'm going to talk about it through, and so hopefully we can understand what I'm going for here a little bit better. Bottom line is, if you buy your property for $150,000, you want some reasonable assurance that your taxes are going to be based on that value. If you bought it for $150,000, you would expect that our fair cash value should be somewhere around $150,000, right? That's what we're looking to do, and that's what this process does. So to do this, we look at every sale that came through as part of that transfer declaration process. We calculate something called a sales ratio. And what that means is a sales ratio is just a comparison of the assessed value that we have on the property relative to what it actually sold for. And remember, assessed value is 33%, 33 1/3% of fair cash value. We want the median ratio in every township to be as close to 33 1/3 as possible. And what do I mean by the median? That sale smack dab in the middle. If you have 100 sales in your township and you put them in order from highest ratio to lowest ratio, we want that 50th ratio or thereabouts to be at 33 1/3. That's our goal. So let's look at this example here. We have 3 properties. We got a tiny little neighborhood here. It's a neighborhood of 3 homes. We have sales prices on each one of these. We have one property that sold for a sale price of $155,000, and its assessed value was $50,995. We divide that $50,995 by $155,000, and that gets us a sale ratio of 32.9. And we're going to do that for the other 2 properties. So we have a sales ratio on the lower left of 33.33, and we have a sale ratio on the lower right of 33.78. What we're going to do is we're going to find that median number, the one in the middle. In this case, The one in the middle is at 33 and a third. We would consider this neighborhood to be equalized. We would be happy with this result. This is what we're going for. You see, we have some that are a little bit higher, right? We have one sale that's a little bit higher. We have one sale that's a little bit lower. But as long as that one in the middle is reasonable, we're going to consider that whole neighborhood to be equalized. That's the nature of the mass appraisal process. Next slide. What happens when that median ratio is not at 33 and a third, which is going to be just about every year? What happens when that median is not at 33 and a third or 100% of fair cash value? Well, you know what we're going to do? We are going to raise or sometimes lower that entire neighborhood or township by an amount necessary to bring that median up or down to 33 and a third. So let's look at this example here again. Let's switch our numbers around and say that instead of a median ratio of 33 and a third, our median ratio is 32.91. So our ratio is a little bit low. In this case, we are going to need to bring that median up to 33 and a third. So that's going to take us an increase of, we did the calculation there. Won't get into the details of specifically why that calculation is what it is, but it's fairly simple. But that gives us a factor of 1.32%. We need to bring the median assessment up by 1.32% to bring it to 33 and a third. But now we're not just going to do that to that one property that sold. We're not going to do that to only the properties that sold. We are doing that to everybody. Because remember, at the end of the day, we are concerned with treating everybody the same way. These sales are representative samples of what's going on in your neighborhood. So if these sales are showing us that your neighborhood is relatively underassessed, we're going to bring the whole neighborhood up by the same factor. That's uniformity. That's what our job is. We need to be uniform. We need to treat you all the same way as best we possibly can. Why do we need to do that? Next slide, please. In short, failure to do this puts us in violation of the Equal Protection Clause of the Illinois and the U.S. Constitution. Equal protection and due process specifically. What that means is if we start treating people disparately, then we're not treating them fairly, then we are violating their constitutional right to due process. We'll give you an example that makes that a little bit more tangible. So we have, let's take our three properties, and let's say that they are split. They're identical properties, all of them, same size lot, same types of house, everything. But the difference between them all is that the top one is in the city of Bloomington Township, lower left is in Dale Township, and lower right is in Bloomington Township. All three of those properties are in the Unit 5 School Corporation. They all pay taxes to Unit 5. They all have different assessors in their jurisdictions. So let's look at our house in Dale Township. You can see its sale price was $150,000 and its assessed value was $50,000. It has a perfect ratio of 33 and a third. It is equalized. It is fairly assessed at market value. Let's look over at Bloomington Township. Same deal. Sale price is $150,000. Its assessed value is $50,000. It is at 33 and a third. It is equitably assessed. Let's look at the house on top, City of Bloomington Township. Sold for the same price. It sold for $150,000. It's identical to the other properties. We would expect that it would sell for something highly similar, wouldn't we? It sells for $150,000, but its assessed value is only $47,745. It is underassessed relative to the other homes in those other townships. Since we know they're in Unit 5, Unit 5 School Corporation is the biggest government entity in McLean County. Sits across 11 townships and even crosses over a little bit into a couple other counties. That district's tax rate is 5.29%. That 5.29% is applied to my house. I live in the Unit 5 School Corporation. It is applied to Treasurer McNeil's house. She lives in the Unit 5 School Corporation. That 5.29% is applied to Rivian. It is in the Unit 5 School Corporation. It's paying 5.29% tax rate. That tax rate does not change across the district. So what has happened here then? If you have one property that is underassessed, look at their tax bills. For Unit 5, Dale Township, their tax bill is $2,646. In Bloomington Township, tax bill's $2,646. We would expect that. They have the same market value. Why should they pay more than their neighbors? Look at the city of Bloomington Township. They're underassessed. Their unequalized tax due is $2,526. That's $120 difference. They are paying $120 less in taxes, but are receiving the same level of service. That is a constitutional inequity. We cannot allow that to happen. That is our responsibility. Why is that? I mean, that doesn't sound, $120, I mean, yeah, that doesn't sound like a lot, right? I mean, it's not great, but $120 isn't a super lot of money. And I want you to think about that. $120 across 11 townships in central Illinois, we are talking millions of dollars in a tax shift between taxpayers who should be paying more than they are, and then the taxpayers who are actually being assessed fairly are making up the slack. That's why we equalize. We have to fix that burden. When you got that letter or you got that postcard, that number that's on that mailer is the equalization number. That's what it takes to bring the median property up to that 33 1/3. Next slide. This is more so true. This is even more true when we're talking about county lines. So in this case, we have, let's take the same homes, but instead of putting them in different townships, let's put them in different counties. So we have McLean County on top, Logan County, and DeWitt County on the bottom. Same situation. In this case, we're talking about Heartland Community College. Heartland sits across five counties in central Illinois, parts of 5 different counties. Its tax rate in 2023 was 0.58632. We apply that same rubric that we did there, and we get a $13 difference between those properties. Again, that doesn't sound like a lot of money. $13 on an individual property, that's not a lot of money. Again, think about 5 counties in central Illinois. Think about how much revenue we're talking about, how unfair that ultimately is to those taxpayers who are being assessed according to the law, to have that one group of taxpayers in the different county not being assessed according to law. That's where my office is responsible for stepping in, because let me tell you, if I don't do it, if I didn't apply that factor to your property, the state of Illinois was going to do the same thing. And if the state of Illinois did it, you would not have liked it, because the state of Illinois comes in with a hatchet and they just say, you know what, this county is off. We need to raise this entire county by 10%. And so they'll put 10% on the entire county. At least when we do equalization, we can micro-target it to different townships, so that townships that are that have more sales activity, we can better track that. And by the way, if the state of Illinois does the equalization, you can't appeal it. You can't file a complaint because it happens after the border review closes. So you want my office to do equalization. It only helps you down the line. And again, keep in mind, what we're really trying to do here is we want the value of your property for tax purposes to be as absolutely close to its market value as we can get it, because that's the best way, that's the most assurance that you can have that you're being taxed equitably and fairly. That's why we do this process. That's why we do what we do. Now, there is going to be a little bit of a difference for most of you in this room than when I usually give this presentation. The difference is going to be that in the city of Bloomington Township, the city does equalization on their own inside of their corporate boundary. So they do a lot of this analysis on a neighborhood level. And what that does is it lets them, they study their own sales data and they make the determination of what those factors need to be, and then they are the ones who apply it. If I had not done, or if they had not done any of that equalization work, I think your factor in City of Bloomington was that I put on from the county was 1.0334. Had the township not done anything, your factor would have been 1.115, somewhere in that ballpark. So either the township does it, I do it, or the state of Illinois does it. One way or another, your property is going to get brought up to market value. So I like to stress that you want that done as close to you as possible, by the unit of government that is as close to you as possible, either by the township if they have the data and the sophistication to do it, or by my office where we have this data and we can apply it township by township. Next slide, please. So all of this being understood, the question becomes, what if you don't agree with your assessment? I'm betting that's why a lot of you are here. You don't agree with your assessed value. Would I be right about that? Okay. I will say this. The property tax assessment process is very thorough. You can see here, we don't go about this job lightly. We are all highly trained in what we do. We have years of education, training, experience doing what we do. And I can say we are pretty good at what we do here in McLean County. We are we are continuously in the top 5 in the state of Illinois in terms of how well done our assessments are. And that's a testament to the level of education and training that your assessors go through. Our assessors do a very good job. We are not perfect. We do not have a crystal ball. We can only do what we can do with the data that we have. We are going to miss things. That's the nature of mass appraisal. That's the reason why we have the appeal process. A lot of people think we assessors don't like the appeal process. And some days it feels like we don't. Some days we really don't. But we appreciate the appeal process because the appeal process is one of the most direct ways we have to make sure that your property characteristics and assessments are correct. If you have a problem with your assessment and you tell us about it, we know, okay, odds are, there might be a problem that we need to look at here if this is causing this kind of attention. That's just the nature of mass appraisal, but we're not always going to be right at what we do. Half of our assessments are going to be wrong, or half of them are going to be too high. Half of them are going to be too low. That's just the way the process is. We do our best to make it as stable and consistent as we possibly can. So having said all that, if you do not believe that your assessed value is representative of the fair market value of your property, you can file a complaint with the McLean County Board of Review. We have complaint forms up here for anybody who has not gotten one yet. We have several more up here. Next slide, please. We think about the complaint process. Anytime you think about some sort of government process, we might think about that picture on the left, right? It's this combative, old guy yelling at you, blah, 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 blah. You've done it right, sir, that you put this new addition on your home in 2015 and you paid this much for it. That's not the process at all. How many of you have filed a complaint before? Show of hands. Anybody? It's more like the picture on the right. It's a dialogue, conversation, back and forth between the assessor, you, the taxpayer, and then the Board of Review members who are asking questions and getting information. It's very informal, at least at the county level. It's a very informal process. Again, like I said, it's a conversation. It's a dialogue. They ask questions. You explain your case. The township explains why they did what they did. The Board of Review says, thank you very much, and they make a decision. It's that simple. Next slide, please. Like I said, this process is fairly informal, and the Board of Review, our Board of Review members, do what they can to make it as unintimidating as they possibly can. It's a very accessible, it's one of the most accessible government things that you will deal with, dealing with the Board of Review. It's very, very informal. It's very, very unintimidating. Couple things you need to keep in mind. Like I said, you're probably all here because you are unhappy with your assessment or curious about your assessment or something like that. What it's all going to come back to at the end of the day. I spent a lot of time talking about fair cash value. Spent a lot of time talking about that. Fair cash value is the basis on which everything is done at the complaint level. Question you need to ask yourself. You need to ask yourself this honestly and realistically. You look at that fair cash value that's on your tax form, and you ask yourself, if I were to put my house on the market today, could I sell my house for this fair cash value? If the answer is no, you should file a complaint. By all means, if you have a reason to think that this fair cash value is too high, then yeah, file a complaint. We encourage it. There might be an issue that we can address. There might be another, you never know. But if you look at that and you say, you know what? Yeah, I'm not happy that it went up, 10% or 12%. Not happy about that, but I know Fred down the street, he just sold his house and its house is like mine and he sold it for $5,000 more than they say my fair cash value is. And then, Joan on the other side of me, she sold her house for, $10,000 more than her fair cash value was. I don't like it that it went up, but you know what? This is fair. This is what the market value of the property is. If that's the case, then it's going to be a difficult thing for you to prove because, like I said, at the end of the day, that's what we're going back to. Another factor, evidence is key. If you have had a recent sale price, if you recently bought your house and you paid $50,000 less than the fair cash value, yes, that is good evidence. You can bring that. The Board of Review will give that a tremendous amount of weight. The gold standard, other than a sale price, is going to be a recent appraisal. I should say, excuse me, I'm sorry. The gold standard is going to be an appraisal done for ad valorem tax purposes for the date of valuation. If you do decide you want to get an appraisal done on your property and you hire an appraiser, that's what you need to tell them you want. Say, I want an appraisal I want an appraisal for the fair cash value of the property for ad valorem tax purposes as of the date of January 1st, 2024. That's the gold standard. That is almost, I say almost because there are no absolutes in this business, but that's as close to a golden ticket as you can get. You don't have to do that. That's an expensive project. It's going to cost you a couple $100s to do that. $450? Okay, there you go. That's the going rate for an appraisal right now. In Bloomington, $450. It's going to cost you that, but you'll get really good evidence. Appraisers are really good at what they do. But then you have to ask yourself, is that going to be worth, is that $450 going to, at the end of the day, be worth what we're going for here? You don't have to have it either. You don't have to have that evidence. Like I said, if you had a recent sale price, if you had an appraisal done for a different reason, like if you had I know we haven't been coming across this a lot lately, but back, a couple of years ago, a lot of folks would have had refinancings done to refinance their mortgage. And as part of that, you get an appraisal. The boards will accept that as long as it's relatively recent to the property, within, say, maybe a year and a half. They'll accept that. If you know a couple of your neighbors who sold their houses, that's good evidence too. You could even go to a realtor, and if you know realtor, say, hey, if I were to put my market on the house today, what do you think I could sell it for? And they'll give you a list of something called a comparative market analysis. They'll give you a list of properties that are similar to yours in your area that have sold and what those prices are. It's not as good as an appraisal, but it's free and it can be pretty compelling evidence. The biggest thing here is this. You have to provide evidence. Something is better than nothing. Bad evidence beats no evidence, right? Another thing, it's not enough to say, I think my property's value is too high. You might be right. I might look at it and laugh and say, yeah, buddy, you're right, this is too high. But unless you document it, unless you give something else, you have to provide an alternative. It's not enough to say, my assessment's too high. You need to document why. You need to support and come up with a value yourself as to what you think the property's value is. Another thing, it's not sufficient. You can't just say, it went up too much too fast. It's 10% is entirely too much for it to go up in 1 year. I sympathize with that. I really do. I taxpayer, I'm a homeowner here in McLean County. My assessment, we got a multiplier of somewhere around 11% on my property. I understand what that's like. At the same time, I know my property is still, relatively speaking, fairly assessed. I think it's worth what the township assessor has it on for. So yeah, I sympathize with it going up too fast, but at the end of the day, there's not much I can say about it because It's fairly valued. And the final one I like to hit, your tax bill is not grounds for a complaint. Again, I sympathize. Illinois, we have some pretty high property taxes. There are reasons for that. Some of them are legitimate. Some of them are a little bit more like, yeah, we probably need to work on them. But Illinois, we have a relatively high property tax burden. Get that. I sympathize with it. At the same time, that's not part of the system here. That's not something we look at. And frankly, it's not something you want us to look at. Because if we start worrying about the taxes that you're paying, that clouds our judgment. That clouds our ability to be neutral and to apply to apply values fairly. You want us to be as objective as we possibly can be. If I start getting concerned that, I know this, this lady's kind of gone through a hard time and she can't afford to pay this tax bill, all of a sudden, that's putting me in a position where I'm not treating everybody else fairly because I'm giving preferential treatment here. You don't want us to do that. You want us to be as fair as possible. We'll do what we can to find other programs to help these individuals, but from the assessment side of things, we try to get always back to market value, to fair cash value. Next slide, please. Your first step should be to talk to your local assessor's office. Find out if you had an increase that differs from what that multiplier was. Find out why it increased. Ask, why was my property revalued? And there's probably a very good reason why they did a revaluation. Usually it has something to do with the fact that they might have identified that you had put in a finished basement. You'd finished your basement. Or you had put a deck on. I know a lot of townships don't pick up stuff like that. But you may have put in an outbuilding. You may have put an addition on your house. Something like that. A lot of cases, that's what happens. And they can explain that to you. They can even, if you do that, they might even determine like, whoa, yeah, we made a mistake here. There's something going on here. We need to take a look at that. And they might be able to help you start addressing that process right away. That's what they're there for. They're not there to be combative. They're not gonna, they're not ride or die on their values. They are, they want their values to be right just as much as you do. So if there's a problem, they're gonna fix it. You have 30 days from the date of notice of that complaint. On your letter, the date of that notice was October 16th, 2024. You have 30 days from that date. If we factor in business days and the fact that it would have fallen on a weekend or those things like that, your complaint date is November 15th. November 15th is 30 days from October 16th. That is your complaint deadline. That is next Friday, week from tomorrow. You need to make sure your complaint is either submitted or postmarked by that date. We cannot extend that. That is state law. It is in black and white in the Illinois legislative code. 30 days. So get it in there. Representation. You need to either represent yourself or be represented by an attorney. Anybody here own a business that they're talking about here? That's like a business property, it's in the name, okay, so we won't worry about it. You either have to represent yourself or be represented by an attorney. Non-attorneys cannot file on your behalf. You hear people, you have some folks who market themselves as taxpayer consultants or value consultants who can do stuff like that. And that's fine. They can do that. But they cannot represent you. You have to, if you have a hearing before the Board of Review, any conversation with the Board of Review has to come through you. If you want to pay somebody to help you, compile evidence or fill out the paperwork, you can certainly do that. They just can't represent you. You have to have an attorney for that. Yes?
Do you have to have a hearing? Because last time I won, I just sent in with some documentation from me.
It's a very good question. It's a very good question. I like that question. No, you do not. I'll talk about that here in a second, but yeah, we'll talk about that here in a second. But yeah, no. Short answer is no, you do not have to have a hearing. just keep in mind one other thing about this. There's no charge to file a complaint. It's a free process. Again, if you hear somebody come up to you and say, hey, for $150, I can help you get your assessment. Okay, as long as you understand that you are paying them for their work. There is no filing fee. You can do this work on your own, file for free, and be fine. Don't let them say, well, we have paperwork fee or processing fee or something like that. If there's one of those, it ain't coming from us. It's coming from them. Next slide, please. Appeal forms. Have a stack of them right here. You can find them in our office. Be right back. You can also take this form. Here we've got QR codes that you can scan with your phone. That top code will take you to the Board of Reviews page where you can access and submit your complaint online electronically. We started doing electronic submissions of appeals back during COVID. Prior to that, we were entirely paper-based. Now we are at, Connie, what would you say the percentage is? 90% of our complaints now come in electronically through our website. So it's really easy to use, super simple, easy to put attachments on there to attach your evidence. It's all really easy to use. You file your complaint. The assessor will get the opportunity to respond. You'll file your complaint with our office. We'll send that evidence to the assessor. The assessor will look at it. And, the assessor might say, they'll look at the evidence you supply and say, hey, you know what? Bob's got a good point here. Yeah, I can agree to this value. They'll send a note back to the Board of Review saying they're in agreement. Boom, no hearing. You're done. A lot of times, the assessor will say, well, I understand where you're coming from here. I've looked at my evidence, and I can't see anything in my evidence, and this is my supporting evidence that says that your value is actually supportable and correct. That happens too. That's fine. That's part of the process. You'll get their evidence. The Board of Review is then going to determine whether or not a hearing is necessary. So to your point, if it's a pretty cut and dried thing, like you had an appraisal in cases, or you had a recent sale price, in a lot of those cases, the board's going to say, yeah, Fred's got a sale price, Sally had an appraisal done, we're just going to go ahead and change the value to that. And then they won't even have a hearing. And they'll just rubber stamp it and they'll file it, and then your taxes will be corrected when the tax bill comes out. If they determine a hearing is necessary, you will be contacted to schedule a date and time. These hearings are like I said, very informal. They do not take a lot of time. They take between 10, 20 minutes, usually closer to the 10 than the 20, sometimes even faster than that. The longest complaint I dealt with this year, I think we had a couple today on some pretty complex properties that took an astonishing 45 minutes for us to go through and hear the evidence. This is not a big time commitment to do these hearings. And again, let me stress, it's very informal. It's very non-confrontational. And then after the board has the hearing, you will receive a final answer after the end of the year. Next slide, please. Here's our 2024 tax cycle numbers. You can't really see these numbers too well. I did put them up there to kind of just illustrate how our process works. I have the factors that we applied in 2023 and 2024. In 2023, you can see that the median factor was about 1.09%. In 2024, it wasn't actually that much higher. The median was 1.10%. So a little bit higher, but not substantially. The biggest difference is in 2023, there were a lot fewer properties up at the top as opposed to 2024 when everybody kind of came to that same level. And again, the reason for that is, I'm going to be completely honest with you, this real estate market we were in for the last 3 years. This was an unprecedented market. Nobody had seen anything like this in at least a generation, probably two, where sales where properties were selling for what they were selling for. We have sort of backed off from that trend over the last several months to a year. We've started to notice some of that has decelerated a little bit. So time will tell how that's going to pan out. But, we went for a lot of years in McLean County where that factor that I was talking about, a lot of years that median factor was 1. from the township, from the county. The township was setting the value and you got a factor of 1, your value didn't change, or you had a factor of 1.01. It was a minor increase to bring it up. A lot of years we had factors lower than 1 that bring your assessment down because we needed a downward factor because sales were lower than what the assessments were. That happens too. People don't believe that and over the last couple of years, but that certainly does happen. We in the past have, and we will in the future, apply factors lower than 1 that'll bring the values down. It's just this market that we're in right now and that we have come out of has surpassed any explanation. I'm not going to get too deep into the details of why the market is what it is. A lot of it was reasons inherent to McLean County with the way McLean County's economy has evolved over the last 10 years. A lot of this is statewide. I got friends statewide in other counties. It's funny. I will call them around the time factors come out, and I'll ask them, "Hey, what's your median factor this year?" Counties our size, counties bigger than us, counties smaller than us, and almost everybody's factors are within a percentage point or two within one another. 3 years ago, my first cycle here, our median factor was about 1.06. I would call my friends in other counties. I said, "What was your factor?" "Oh, 1.07, 1.05. It's a statewide thing, and frankly, guys, it's a national thing. This was a national trend. People's assessed values, these home values, were going up. This heartburn that we've all gotten from these increasing assessments was not isolated to the state of Illinois. I got my start in my career in Indiana. They had the exact same issues, just on a different scale. In Illinois, we use a 3-year average of sales that we're looking back on. What that 3-year average does, it kind of smooths out that increase. So there were a couple years, like last year, I think had I applied a 1-year factor instead of a 3-year factor, had I applied a 1-year factor, everybody would have gotten somewhere between 25 to 30% increase on your assessment. We use a 3-year factor, so that tends to smooth it out. So your increase is only 10%. In Indiana, they do annual factoring. And so I know a lot of places, I talked to my assessor friends over there, where they were getting annual factors of 25, 30%. Because that's the way their system works. So this was a national thing. So I don't want you to feel like, Illinois is somehow distinct in that regard. So everybody is kind of sympathetic to what you're going through. And you can see the equalized assessed value there in the final column, what we ultimately levy for assessments on the property. We have I want to say we ticked over $5 billion in equalized assessed value in McLean County, which is $15 billion in market value in McLean County. So that's a lot of money that we're dealing with here. Next slide, please. What kind of other options do we have? So we already talked about if you didn't have your assessment, if the assessment complaint isn't going to be beneficial to you, what else is available to you? Well, we have our exemptions. I talked about some of those earlier. We have our homestead exemption. Every homeowner gets a homestead exemption. We have our senior homestead exemption. If you are over 65, you are entitled to the senior homestead exemption. What's the one thing about that exemption? Guys, I don't know when you turn 65. You got to tell us. You got to let us know. Come into the office on your birthday, put a note to yourself. Say, "Hey, you know what? I turned 65. I need my 65 senior." We'll put it on there. We'll take a photocopy of your driver's license. We'll apply it to your property, and that'll be another benefit for you. We also have a senior freeze. The senior freeze is for lower income individuals. This will freeze your assessed value at a base year once you qualify, and then no matter what factor I put on, what other changes get put onto your property, your value will never go above that frozen amount. That's a very nice benefit if you qualify for it. Like I said, it is income capped. So if your income is over $65,000, you do not qualify. That is statutory. It's not something I control. There is chatter down in Springfield about maybe increasing that number. If and when it happens, we will certainly get that change in as quickly as we can. And the chatter is becoming more and more urgent as, as these values have gone up and as costs have gone up. What's that? I'm sorry, I thought I heard somebody say something. Okay. But yeah, so I would expect probably if I were a betting man, I would say within the next probably 2 or 3 years, you'll see that number go up to something else. But for right now, it's $65,000. If you are disabled, you qualify for a benefit on your property taxes for your disability. If you are a disabled veteran with a service-connected disability, there are a series of exemptions that can benefit you. These benefits start at 30% service-connected. If you have a 30% service-connected disability, you get a property tax benefit. If you have a 50% service-connected benefit, service-connected disability, you get a larger benefit. If you have a 70% or greater service-connected disability, you are tax exempt. If you have veterans in your life who served and have a service-connected disability, please send them to our office, even if they think it's minor. I've talked to a lot of veterans about this who I know have disabilities, who service-connected, and they're all very modest about it and be like, well, I don't want to take something from somebody else. And I tell them, get in here and fill this out. You earned it. They want to give it to you. Get in here, get this filled out. So if you know anybody who has a service-connected disability of greater than 30%, have them come into our office. And then we have a couple other benefits too that are, and we have a handout that has all these displayed for you, and you can find it on the website. The one I did want to talk about that's new this year is the World War II. Thank you, Connie. The legislature just passed a law that says from now on, if you are a World War II veteran, you as well are tax exempt. So if we have any World War II veterans, I know there are a couple still. How many have we had filed in McLean County? We've had 6 filed so far in McLean County. So we do have some World War II veterans. If you know of a World War II veteran, your parent is a World War II veteran, come in, get that paperwork filled out, get your benefit. They passed it for a reason.
What's the benefit?
So for a World War II veteran, you become tax exempt on your property taxes. Yep, you will pay no property taxes. Yep. No property taxes if it's a full property tax exemption. Yes, sir.
Don't know For those that don't know, the disabled veteran paperwork is very easy, nowhere near as burdensome as if you're filing a complaint against your property tax.
Thank you very much for that. The paperwork, the VA will generally provide you with everything that you need to fill that out. And Veterans Assistance, is that what the name of the Veterans Assistance with McLean County? They can help you, they can at least help you walk through the paperwork to get that benefit. And in our office too, we actually have a staff member who is very well versed in military exemptions and military disability. So so if you have anybody, send them our way. We're happy to help. Next slide, please. And here's just a graphic of the exemptions that we have available to you. I have this handout, the exact handout over here if anybody wants one, but here it is up on the screen. Next slide, please. Here are the exemptions that we offer right now in the county as of 2024. These numbers are a little bit off because this was when I put this PowerPoint together for the first hearing we had a month or two ago. Those numbers have grown since then. But you can see we have the homestead exemption there. It's the second number down, 43,000 homestead parcels in McLean County. To put that number into perspective, we have about 68,000 parcels in McLean County. So more than 2/3 of the parcels in McLean County are homesteads, are people's primary residences. And then you can see some of the other exemptions that we offer. Next slide, please. This is my last slide. This is a request for a change in mailing address. This is an important one. Becky will harp on me for making sure that we get this mentioned. If you have paid your mortgage off, first off, congratulations. That's a great thing. Secondly, we don't know that you paid your mortgage off till you tell us. So if you don't tell us, your property tax bill is still going to go to the mortgage company. And it's a 50-50 shot whether or not you're going to find out that you didn't have your taxes paid until you get a notice in the mail says, hey, your taxes are late. And you're like, well, I didn't get a notice. Well, that's because the notice was still going to your mortgage company because you didn't tell us that you no longer had a mortgage. So on that big momentous day when you burn your mortgage, like they did in the old TV shows, watched an episode of MASH where they did that, where Colonel Potter burned his mortgage. Heartwarming. When that day comes, make a note to say, hey, I'm going to call the assessor's office and let them know that I no longer have a mortgage. We'll get that taken off. You'll start getting your tax bill and everything will be great. So, does anybody have any assessment-related questions related to the value of your property, the complaint process, or anything like that? Ms. Sterenberg.
I'm assuming most people here are the City of Bloomington Township. Tim, can you go over our website and how they could find comparables? We've been having a lot of people complain about where do I even start with the comparables? They see the comparable grid on the form. Our site actually provides, whether you want to do it for assessment reasons or sales reasons, how you can find some really good comparable sales to see where you're in line with everybody else.
Thank you, Maureen. And that's a fantastic point. Thank you for bringing that to my attention. The city, if you are a taxpayer in the City of Bloomington Township, their website has a tool on there that allows you, when you look your property up, it will give you a button that you can do a comparable properties search. And it will actually take the details of your property and it'll run a quick calculation and it'll generate a list of properties similar to yours in your neighborhood and what they have sold for. It's a very, very handy tool. What's your website, Maureen?
I would just literally Google search City of Bloomington Township Assessor's Office. The first one will take you to the parcel inquiry. And if you have need any assistance with it, just give our office a call and we'll be more than happy to help walk you through it.
So what she said to do was just get into Google and literally Google search City of Bloomington Township Assessor's Office, and the first link that pops up will be the parcel level search. Yeah, thank you so much. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I did a protest about 20 years ago, and I seem to recall that there was something about not using comparables within 12 months or older than 12 months. I ended up in a hearing, and like I said, it's 20 years ago. Is that still applicable?
That's a great question. So what I'm going to say is this. You want your comparable to be as close to the tax date as you possibly can. So you want it as close to January 1st, in this case of 2024, as you can get it. We also understand it's not usually very possible. You're going to have dates that differ. Like I said, I don't want to put words in the Board of Review's mouth because they are an independent body and they make their own determinations. So, usual disclaimer there. What I will say is this, as long as it's within a year of the lien date. So if you had an appraisal done in February of 2023 and the lien date is January 1st, 2024, they're probably going to give that a good amount of weight. If you had an appraisal done in March of 2022 and you're trying to use it for a January 1st, 2024 valuation date, probably going to be a little bit more skeptical of that number. Again, there's some nuance here. There's not a right or wrong. There's not a hard and fast, well, this sale date was 6 months and 1 day older than this, so we're not going to use it. Every sale, every bit of data you can provide will help you. It's just how much weight they give. You can supply a 3-year-old appraisal and it's better than nothing. They might give it a little bit of weight, but it's not going to be as good as an appraisal that you had done 2 months ago. So again, there's sort of a gradient here of how that weight is given. But generally, the closer to the date you can get it, but there's no hard and fast, like I said, there's no 6 months and it's in, 6 months or it's out. Just try to, as close as you can get it.
Can you hurt yourself? Can you hurt yourself by filing a complaint? Will the repercussion be the tax go up?
I get that question a lot, and that is a valid question. I have never seen it happen in McLean County. It is one of those things that it is technically possible that the board has the authority to review the appraisal. I can almost guarantee, as I'm standing here in front of you right now, that our board of review will never do that. Because, you know, they are not going to essentially punish somebody for seeking, like I always said, for seeking redress for something. They're not going, they might say, yeah, no, they, you know, yeah, no, you're not getting a reduction here, but they're not going to, they're not, at least for that year. So again, this comes into the nuance of if you tell us about something and we find out about something in the complaint process that we didn't know about, we might not put it on in that year for the complaint, but for next year, it might go on. So like we find out in the complaint process that you finished your basement and we didn't know you had a finished basement. Then, you know, probably down the line, you're going to have to expect that, you know, we're going to put on value for a finished basement. But those cases are vanishingly rare when that happens. Does that answer your question? Yes, yes, sir.
Not that all, and I wouldn't know the percentage, but when people receive this form in the mail, they probably just look at it, set aside, even if they don't look at it. Now, just based on this, I don't know what my taxes will be for the following year. Is it a burden on your office that when this is sent out, people would also be notified what their taxes will be before they get the tax bill? Because that's when your phones are going to probably light up in your office, is when the people receive their tax bills.
I understand that question completely. That's a very good question. We're looking at a copy of your assessment letter. This is what you would have gotten in the city of Bloomington Township. Most all of you would have gotten this letter. You can see we have three numbers on there. We have your prior year's value. That's column 1. We have your current year value, which is column 2. The current year value that was submitted by your assessor's office. May I use your, in this case, the last year's value was $92,469. The assessor certified to our office a value of $115,586. Then my office applied a multiplier of 3.34% to get to a final value of $119,447. So yes, that is how that letter works. We cannot provide you an estimate or tell you what your taxes are going to be for one very simple reason. We don't know what your taxes are going to be. The process starts with the assessment and the assessed value. The taxing bodies right now are getting this information. Now that all the assessments are in, the board of reviews doing what they do, this is when the taxing bodies are starting to develop their budgets. What they're going to do is remember when I talked in the beginning about this being an ad valorem process and how the taxes that you are billed are based on the assessed value. Once they know what their assessed value is, that will determine what their tax rate will be. There are no hard and fast rules here. So generally speaking, what should happen is as assessed value goes up, the tax rate, all things being equal, will go down. So to illustrate this point, in a perfect world, I could say, you know, I'm going to be a nice guy, and I'm going to say, you know what? I think every taxpayer in this room deserves a reduction on their assessment of 25%. So I'm going to go through with my red pen, and I'm going to start slashing through all your assessments, and I'm going to lower you by 25%, you by 25%, you by 25%. I'm going to lower everybody by 25%. You know what would happen to the tax rate? The only thing would happen, your tax rate would go up by 25% because the units are still going to collect what they need to collect. So what that means is if the tax rate drop or if the assessed value drops, that pie is getting smaller. The pie gets smaller, we all have to pay a bigger slice of that pie. What happens when the pie gets bigger, though? Let's say I decided, hey, you know what? I'm going to be Mr. Who's the guy from the Christmas Carol? Scrooge. I'm going to be Mr. Scrooge. I can't believe I forgot that. I'm going to be Mr. Scrooge, and I'm going to raise everybody by 50% because, you know, we need more revenue here. So I'm going to raise everybody by 50%. You know what happened to your tax rate? All things being equal, the tax rate would drop by 50%. Your tax bill would stay exactly the same. That's an important part of this conversation too. All we do is allocate that tax burden out. That's the assessment process. The taxes that you pay are based on spending decisions made by your local units of government. If every unit of government in McLean County said, you know what, we're not going to change how much we're going to collect this year. We're going to flatline our collection. We collected, I don't know, $10 million last year. We're going to collect $10 million this year. You know what happened to the tax rate for that unit? Because we raised everybody's assessed value by 10%, that tax rate is going to drop by 10%. So you're going to pay less in taxes. Does that make sense? So that's the one reason why we say we can't predict what because we don't know what the tax rate's going to be. If you want to estimate it, what I'm going to tell you to do is this. Take that value, multiply it by, I'm going to give you a very conservative high number. I'm going to default to the high side so that there are no surprises here. I'm going to take that assessed value and I want you to multiply it by 9%. That's going to give you a high number. Because I don't think anybody here is going to have a tax rate that's above 9%. Maybe there is, I'm not sure. I think most of the city is probably at 8 3/4, I want to say. But I don't want to say that exactly because that number is going to change as these units start passing their budget. But you take that assessed value, you multiply it by, and you can run it on different, like multiply it by 8.5%, multiply it by 9%, multiply it by 9.5%. So you can see sort of a spectrum.
We say take that value and multiply it by the tax rate that you paid the previous year. That
You
would
could
give you
do
a
that
good way
too.
to estimate. That's how we suggest that our taxpayers estimate their future tax bill. So
Yeah, and that's that number. If you have your last year's tax statement, you'll have your last year's tax rate that you paid. And that's going to be the best indicator. I use 8.5% because it's a nice round number that I just remember off the top of my head, and it's somewhere close. But yeah, and that's going to be high because you're taking that tax rate against the value on that form, which is not inclusive of your homestead exemption, your senior exemption. So those will take a little bit off as well, but it still will give you that estimate of what your value is. Great question. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, sir.
About halfway through your presentation, you talked about a form that we would have all have seen. Don't remember the number of it. What would have triggered us, the scenario that triggered that where we would have seen that form? Because I don't ever remember seeing that.
Like I said, that's a great question. The P-Tax 203, the transfer declaration, when you purchased your property, you would have filled that form. Now, if you bought your property 30, 40 years ago, it's an entirely different thing. But if you bought your property within the last 10 or 15 years, that form would have been part of the recording package when you closed on it.
We bought our property in 86, Bear property, and we built the house.
Oh, okay. Then the law was probably substantially different back then. But yeah, that there was still, oh boy, I shouldn't say that. I was still watching cartoons on Saturday morning back in 86. I don't know what the process was for sales declaration, but at least in the last, 20 years, it's been this process.
We literally built the house ourselves, did all the work, did everything, so nobody was involved but us. So that's the reason I couldn't figure out where this form would have came in.
Yeah, it's at the closing process. All right, any other questions on assessment? Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. I'm working on the comparables. And when I look up the property tax record, neighboring properties to ours, there is a note on several of these that either says low ratio or high ratio. And the ratios vary from 22% to about 38%. So can I still use that as comparables? I mean, is that something that's way off?
That's a great question. That is the work of the Township Assessor's Office when they put that note on there where it says low ratio or high ratio. They're going through, and like I said, we look at every sale as it comes through. Any sales that are extremely low or extremely high, they're going to flag as for advisement. You probably, if that sale happened within the last 2 or 3 years, you probably saw low ratio a lot. Yeah, because that's what the rate
Like one within the last 6 months.
was a high ratio.
Whoa.
Oh, okay, yeah. Yeah, so you're going to see a lot of low ratios just because of that's the way the market's been. You can still use those sale prices as absolutely. The sale price that's what the market says they're selling for. The ratio doesn't matter in the appeal part of it. You're just looking at what it sold for. Maureen.
To kind of piggyback off of what Tim's saying, also know that let's say you're using a 2022 sale and it says low ratio, that's a note that note is static. So that note is from prior to us putting on an equalization adjustment. So it said low ratio because at the time in 2022, it was a low ratio, but the assessment could have been brought up in 2023 or 2024. So that comment is a very static comment. So just because it was a low ratio in 2022 doesn't mean that the value that we have is representative of that sale anymore.
Yeah, you might even go deeper in those records and you'll see back in 2014 where it says high ratio, because we had a lot of high ratios back when we were starting to come out and really fully emerge from the Great Recession. There were still a lot of high ratios that we sifted through, and they would still be listed in the record. Yes, sir.
So my question is this. So I don't see, I guess, 50 other homeowners that are in my association or whatever that are here tonight. So I'm the lone person that fills it out. Is it just a waste of my time since we're constitutionally talking about everything has to be equal that's out there? Because I would go within my neighborhood. I have poor rich people problems. I'm a poor rich person compared to the top end other houses that are in my neighborhood.
So I would say this: what it's all going to come back to is that market value, that fair cash value. If at the end of the day, we talk about equity because that's what the assessor's office's first responsibility is equity, making sure that your home is assessed at the same basis as your home, is assessed on the same basis as your home. That's what we're looking to maintain. But the Board of Review will then look at it and say, you know what? Yeah, these assessments were levied fairly and equitably. But Mr. Smith has a transfer declaration. He purchased his property for $30,000 less than the fair cash value. Regardless of where your neighborhood is, where your neighbors are, the Board of Review is going to give that sale the weight, and they will lower you down. Or I would expect, I'm not going to put words in their mouth, but I would expect they're going to bring you down because the courts in Illinois have said that the sale price of a property is the best evidence of its value. So even if every other home in your neighborhood is at a fair cash value of $200,000, if you brought a sale declaration that said you purchased it in an arm's length sale for $170,000, the Board of Review is going to give that a lot of weight because they're not as concerned about equity as the assessor's office is because they have a different mandate. Does that make sense? So yeah, don't worry about if, that's a very different process. That's a good question. Anybody else before we move on? All right, I'm going to turn the floor over to Rebecca McNeil. She is our wonderful, wonderful county treasurer. She does a fantastic job of informing folks about this more direct part of the process that you really feel, and that's the tax bill itself. So, Becky, go ahead.
Thank you very much for coming tonight. Again, I'm Becky McNeil, the McLean County Treasurer. My part of this presentation is going to take about 10 more minutes of your time. So if you can just hang with me, I'm going to move very quickly. Again, that change of address form by Illinois state statute, only the property owner, trustee, or power of attorney can update a mailing address for a property tax bill. A mortgage company cannot. So never, ever, ever assume that it's going to get updated through your mortgage company because it's not. They don't have the authority. What is the county treasurer's role? Treasurers of all counties shall also be the county collector of their county. The county treasurer is responsible for the billing, collection, and distribution of all property taxes. Calculating the tax bill is fairly straightforward. The overall tax rate is calculated as follows. So put things into perspective, we talk about the tax cycle. Tim has been talking about everything that's been happening here in 2024. The taxing districts of McLean County are all getting ready to file their levies with the county clerk's office. They're due in December. The levy is the actual ask. It's what they're asking for. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what happens with your assessed value. If your taxing districts don't ask for more money, you're not going to be paying more in taxes. Now, if your taxing districts asks for more money, then obviously your taxes are going to go up. If your taxing districts ask for less money, then your tax rates are going to go down. So it's the levy, the taxing district levy, divided by the equalized assessed value, that equals the tax rate. We have about 200 taxing districts in McLean County that this computation is performed for in the county clerk's office. And then they take the tax rate. We take that, and the calculation for your individual tax bill is the equalized assessed value, the equalized assessed value less your exemptions. That gives you your taxable EAV on your tax bill. And then your taxable EAV times the tax rate equals your tax due. Go ahead and go on. So according to Illinois state statute, the collector mails the tax bill out 30 days prior to the delinquent date. You have 30 days once that tax bill goes out to pay the first installment. You can always pay the second installment at the same time. The information on the tax bill is very detailed. We'll have a lot of people call in and say, is there any way you could just put less information on this tax bill? We cannot do that because by Illinois state statute, we have to include all of the taxing districts that you pay into, the taxing district rates, the levied, the pension rate, pension levy, the TIF districts, total amount due, difference over the prior year, et cetera, et cetera. All of that information that's on that tax bill is essential and part of that bill. Property taxes in the state of Illinois are collected a year in arrears. So when you get your tax bill, you'll read, it'll say 2024 payable 2025 next year. That goes back to, I believe, the Great Depression in the state of Illinois, where up in Cook County, they decided to give taxpayers a year off. But of course, they didn't forgive the taxes. They just said, we're just going to delay that collection cycle for a year. So now we are collecting always a year in arrears. If you ever sell your home or you ever buy a home, at closing, you're going to see this credit for property taxes. If you sell, you're going to give the buyer a credit for all of 2024 plus what you own the home in 2025. And so here in tax year 2023, payable 2024, McLean County, across 68,000 parcels for 200 taxing districts, we billed $431.8 million. Again, this is what the taxing districts have asked for. This is what they have filed in the county clerk's office as their levy for operating purposes. How do they do that? Their boards, they adopt a budget, they adopt a levy. For example, McLean County government is one of the 200. McLean County government is meeting next week and is going to adopt their budget and is going to formally adopt their tax levy. From there, it's going to go to the county clerk's office as well as all of the other districts of the county. And then we start that process of calculating the tax rates in 2025. That's why we cannot tell you when the assessment notices go out what your taxes are going to be, because that tax bill is not going to be generated for another 8 months, 9 months, and the taxing districts have not even filed their levies yet. We're completely separate. Tim's office is completely separate from that process. He has no idea of knowing what the taxing districts are going to ask for, if they're going to ask for more or less or whatever. If you are missing your tax bill, please call us. Go to our website. We have thousands of property tax bills that go to mortgage companies. That's a great thing. It makes it very easy for you. However, the problem with that is you really lose touch with your tax bill. What's happening with your tax bill? What exemptions you have or what exemptions you don't have? What exemptions are available? Every time we send a property tax bill out, we include an exemption insert. So if you choose to have your tax bill go to your mortgage company, that is your choice, but make sure that you're jumping online and you're taking a look at the different exemptions that you have. Make sure that you're not missing out on something, and just keep yourself informed. Go ahead and go on to the next slide. So in regards to collection, taxes are collected in 2 installments, generally due in June and September. They shall be deemed delinquent after each due date and shall bear interest at the rate of 1.5% per month. That 35 ILCS 221-15, that is an Illinois state law we are required to follow. And sometimes, we're very sympathetic for the different situations that occur and why someone inadvertently did not pay the property tax by the installment due date. But as you can see there, that law says that they shall be deemed delinquent and shall bear interest at the rate of 1.5% per month. All delinquent taxes shall be mailed notice of judgment and publication. Collector shall apply to the circuit court for judgment and tax sale order. Collector shall hold tax sale to registered buyers. All of the entire process that we follow is outlined in the Illinois compiled statutes. And so that's something that I want to stress to you, as well as Tim's process. We don't make the rules. We're simply administering Illinois state law. Here in McLean County, buyers that come to our tax sale, we actually had our tax sale in this room 1 week ago tomorrow, and had about 22 buyers come in and buy taxes on about 400 parcels. The interest rate that those tax buyers will bid is between 0 and 9%. That's what the redemption is based off of. Mobile homes is between 0 and 18%. We have a lot of mobile homes that go at 18%. We accept the lowest interest rate. The property owner has about 3 years to redeem the sold taxes through the county clerk's office. And if not, the tax buyer can petition the court for tax deed. There's a lot that goes into that process. It's not a simple process, but there's a lot of mailings that the tax buyers must complete, and then they go to court and go through a lengthy process in proving their case to the judge before actual tax deed is granted. The delinquent taxes on 459 real estate and 87 mobile homes were sold for tax year 22, payable 2023, at a weighted average of about 0.28. And that was the sales that occurred to the buyers themselves. This year it was much, much different. And the reason why is because as interest rates go up, these tax buyers, they're paying more to borrow money, to take out lines of credits, to do the business that they're doing. And so this year our tax sale was significantly higher. Go ahead and go to the next slide. As far as distribution goes, our distributions, as you are taxpayers, or as you are paying your property tax bills, we are also pushing out distributions. Again, we have 200 taxing districts here in McLean County. When you pay your property taxes, there is not 1 penny of it that goes to the state government or the federal government. This is all local property taxes that go to local taxing districts. So your fire protection districts, road districts, libraries, cities, towns, county, etc. Approximately 6 to 8 distributions are made between the months of May and November. Timely billing, collection, and distribution are essential, and it prevents a taxing district from having to issue tax anticipation warrants. So when we talk about the tax cycle and what Tim's work is, it comes into the clerk's office, comes into my office in the month of April. We generate the tax bill in May, and first installment's due in June, second in September. What's happening during that time is the taxing districts themselves, they have built their budgets, their operations based off of our schedule. So if our bills are being released in an untimely manner, then these taxing districts, they're going to have to borrow money. What's that going to do? That's going to cost more to you as a taxpayer. Go ahead and push to the next slide. Here's the copy of our tax bill. One of the things up on the top, in the middle there, you see the tax code. The tax code, these are all codes that are developed that are assigned to each parcel that determines geographically all of the different taxing districts that serve your parcel. So Mr. Jorzak's parcel, the taxing districts that serve his parcel are McLean County, Normal Township, Town of Normal or Normal Township Road District, Bloomington Water Reclamation District, the Airport Authority, Unit 5, Normal Public Library, and Heartland Community College. Obviously, as you go around through the 68,000 parcels, the taxing districts that apply to those parcels, those are going to be the ones that come up on that tax bill. Along the right-hand side are the calculations we were talking about earlier. They have the land value, the building value, the total assessed value, and then we have the different exemptions that are coming off. And then we get down to the total net taxable value. That net taxable value times the tax rate, that is your tax due, divided over 2 installments. And then we also have the difference between the current year and the prior year as well, showing on there. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Here's our contact information. I told you I was going to kind of blow through it, but I wanted to bring it full circle for you so you understand that what the assessor's office is doing, and then it moves through the tax cycle, through the county clerk's office, and into the treasurer's office. You're going to be hearing from us in 2025 in regards to the information that Mr. Jorzak's office is evaluating, analyzing now. All of his data then goes on to the state of Illinois Department of Revenue, and ultimately Illinois Department of Revenue will give the county a multiplier, an overall multiplier, and then that is what starts the process moving of establishing the tax rates. So, do you have any questions? Thank you.
Awesome. Oh, you got a question right down here in front, Becky.
It's more just like a comment. I wanted to thank you for all taking your time and coming out here tonight and offering this information. So it was very good.
Yes.
And the other thing was, at your level for the county treasurer, you have that option to set up pre-authorized payment of your property tax bills. That's wonderful, because you guys don't take them out until the exact day they're due. So I don't have to pay 2 weeks at a time, worried that the payment won't straggle in. So I just, when it comes, I got the money in the bank, and when you take it, you take it.
Right. So, we have, when a lot of taxpayers roll off of the escrow process, they're so used to it and they appreciate that automation that's involved there. We have a program where you set the money aside in your bank account. You can fill out a form on the back of your tax bill, place your bank account number and routing number, and then on the due date, we will pull that tax payment from your bank account. We send out emails, we send out text messages, try to communicate. When we send our bill, it will say do not pay. We'll pull that direct debit. So there's such a wide variety of different payment options that we offer. Another thing I wanted to mention to you is in regards to the evaluation process. Obviously, by the time that you get your tax bill, it is too late to appeal the value of your property. However, it's not too late to apply for exemptions. Many taxpayers will still apply for exemptions once they get that insert. They'll look and they'll say, "Well, wait a minute. I can apply for this." And so what will happen is if you do qualify, the Supervisor of Assessment's office will notify us, and we will do a recalculation process on the tax bill. If you've already paid, we'll issue a refund And if you have not, then you'll get a corrected tax bill for a lower amount. So please make sure that you're watching those exemptions. It's incredibly important, advantageous to you. The exemptions, they're not always changing, but they come from state of Illinois. They come from Springfield. So we never know when those are going to change. Or, for example, as he was talking earlier about the senior assessment freeze, some of the income levels, that information does change. So keep in touch with your property tax bill. If you have it going to your mortgage company, go online, take a look at it, call us. We'll be more than happy to send you a duplicate copy for your records.
And they can also get their duplicate, just print it right off.
Absolutely. All information, property tax information is public information. So you can go out to the website, you can pull up your parcel, you can pull up your neighbor's parcel. If you're concerned that maybe your valuation is incorrect, obviously, to appeal your valuation, you're going to go to the township level. But some taxpayers do go out and scroll through and evaluate in the neighborhood how the taxes are being distributed. So, any questions? Yes?
Are you saying that if you didn't qualify for the senior, let's say you didn't qualify for the senior freeze based on last year's income tax form, but maybe you do qualify this coming income tax season in April, it's not too late to try to get that figured into your tax? Is that what you're saying?
You can't go retroactive, but you'll apply for that exemption through the Supervisor of Assessments office. If they determine that you do qualify for the current, for 24 payable 2025, they will notify us. Even if your tax bill's already been computed, we will issue a corrected tax bill. Even if it's paid, we'll issue a corrected tax bill and we'll issue a refund. So if you've got a question about an exemption, make sure that it's just safer to call and ask and, be informed. The other thing I wanted to tell you about is, tonight we've talked about the assessed value, what you can do if you don't agree with your assessed value. There's an appeal process. We have the exemptions as well. For many taxpayers, that's a way for them to reduce their property tax liability. But there's another thing that you can do, and it's called public participation. If you want to become more involved in the property tax process in the state of in the county of McLean, reach out to your board members. Look at your tax bill. Find out what districts you pay property taxes to. Reach out to the board members of those taxing districts. Have a conversation with them. You might have a better understanding through communication and collaboration as far as what their programs are, how are your property taxes being utilized. A lot of times just communication and education helps with public understanding. So consider running for a board a board seat. We just came off of the election cycle, but it is truly rewarding to be in public service, to serve the public. But don't be afraid to reach out to the people that represent you and express your opinion.
Every one of these bodies has a budget that is adopted in a public meeting that has been advertised to the public for a prescribed period of time. None of what they are doing is being done in secret. It functions like it's done in secret because people don't show up, they don't pay attention to it. But this is all public, and you have every right, and frankly, you have the obligation, if you want to see change done, to participate in that way. So I encourage you to look at some of these bodies. It could be a body as big as the school board, the community college district, be something as small as your local library or the water reclamation district. But you have every right to observe and participate in that process.
There are 200 taxing districts in McLean County. And as Tim said, some of them are little fire protection districts, library districts, but your contribution can certainly be valuable. And, especially if you want to keep property taxes under control, But like I said, you might sit down at the table and realize the different programs that local taxing district, that local government body is working on and working through, and how beneficial they are to the public. You might have a better understanding of where your property taxes go. Or you might have a suggestion that you can pass along to that board member where they can take that back and maybe make some modifications and changes. In the end, it's public participation.
Any other questions tonight? Yes, sir.
This is more of a comment than a question. This is more addressed to maybe the county board members that are here and stuff. We live out in Northeast Bloomington. We got really big increases out there. A lot of those people are State Farm executives. It's no official talk, but we know off the record that State Farm is potentially looking at leaving Bloomington, Illinois, and maybe going to Dallas, Texas. And if they go to Dallas, Texas, the whole world of Bloomington goes up in the air, because prices of homes out by us are going to fall by a third. Some people have said a half, which is have a huge impact on stuff. So it was a case of our concern as a family was that the people be aware of this, and maybe if there's a tax revenue increase, they get not to, don't spend all the money now, because it may be disappearing in 3 years when they leave, because they've, Cat's gone from Peoria, went to, to Deerfield or whatever, and then they're back, they're in Dallas now, right by where State Farm is looking. So, and there's other corporations. And I grew up in Rockford, Illinois, which has been destroyed by all the corporations leaving. Rockford's just a hulk. It's a mess. It's just abandoned buildings and unemployment. So, and thank you for giving me this time.
All right, before you head out, just to reiterate, we have complaint forms right here if you have not already gotten one. You can also find this online. Pick up one of these sheets. With the QR code, you can access and you can fill and submit this form out electronically. You can also find that handout we had with all of the exemptions and deductions on it. Please grab a business card. If you have any questions, feel free to contact myself, contact Ms. McNeil, contact our office. Thank you all so much for coming out.